Moving right along. In this chapter, we're going to talk about a very important panel, and that's the Layers panel, kind of a Layers 101, if you will. Most programs in Design, Photoshop, Illustrator, they all have Layers panels. Very important for control. We're going to start with layer basics, how we use them, what we do with them, why they're there in the first place. We're going to talk about generating layers and then moving objects seamlessly, no copy paste, actually moving these objects into separate layers for control. We'll talk about all the panel options that we have with layers. There are quite a few, and they can really help you control what you're doing on complicated documents. And finally, we'll create a little project. We'll work with opacity in blending modes to create well, I'll tell you what, I'll leave that for the end. Layers 101, let's go. In your working folder, you will find a document called mandala.ai. Go ahead and open that thing up. We're going to have a frank discussion on layers. You can be frank in this discussion if you want to. Layers, to me, are a very important part of working and controlling anything in an object-oriented program. But they're not as important as, say, a program like, say, Photoshop. Do you ever work in Photoshop? Now, in Photoshop, it's kind of like paint on a canvas, isn't it? So you're painting on something. Now, you do have an undo. But think in the real world paint on a canvas. I work in oils and watercolors, and I might work on something for a couple of days. And then I decide I want to add some major element, like a big tree or something in my landscape. There was a painter on PBS by the name of Bob Ross. He used to teach people how to paint. He used to call that your bravery test, because after working all this time on this painting, you're going to add this element. And if you make a mistake, there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. Now, we have undo, but we also have layers. So in Photoshop, being a raster-based program, paint on canvas, I would create a new layer. And then I would put that element in the layer, and if I didn't like it, I could remove the layer. I mean, that's a nice thing. But in Photoshop, because of that paint on canvas kind of effect, layers are like indispensable. You really couldn't work in Photoshop without layers. Now, in Illustrator, we're talking object-oriented. So each item kind of stands on its own. And although it's important to have them, they're not as indispensable. But yet I wouldn't want to do without them. In Illustrator, primarily, not the only thing, layers are for control. Now, in this one right here called mandala, and mandalas are actually Indian artwork that they use in meditation to concentrate, and I will admit that it took a lot of concentration to make this thing. But over here, let me move over into layers. Let me pull that out so you can see them. Most of you have been here before. I do have 4 layers. Now, each one of the layers contains elements of this complex drawing, like flowers. And if I turn that on and off, indeed the flowers, the leaves, my pretties over here, and then the backdrop right here. They control each part of the layer. Have you ever done this? You're going to work on one of these flowers, but you wind up selecting the wrong thing. I hate it when that happens. So one of the things about control is if I want to do this, I can turn off, show hide, everything but what I want to work on. So I can now come over here and I can work on this piece. I can play around with it. The time comes eventually maybe that I want to actually move a piece, but I need to see everything else so I can relate it. So maybe I turn everything back on again. And then I have the problem again of maybe selecting the wrong thing and I'm trying to move this. So I can come over here and I can actually lock the layers by clicking here. The little lock's very visual. And that means the only thing I can select is this. So I now have the best of both worlds. I can see things to organize and arrange, and yet the only thing I can move is the thing that's unlocked. Now let me go ahead and reopen those right here. Layers have a stacking order, and so do the Layers panel itself. As a matter of fact, well, let me turn these off for a second. If I move this flower over here, you will notice there is a stacking order. Okay, this flower is on top of that flower. If I go to the word object arrange and change the stacking order of that one flower, like say send it to the back, it's still in the back of that layer, not in the back of the Layers panel. Let me go ahead and undo that. So our first stacking order is controlled by the layer itself. The second stacking order is controlled by the Layers panel. For example, let me turn everything back on again. If I decide I want to move an entire layer, I will be changing its stacking order. It's like an elevator. So if I go to backdrop and click on it and drag it up, see that little line? Okay, that line represents which floor you're about to get off on. And if I put us on the top floor, everybody out, of course, everything is going to go away because that layer contains a lot of stuff. So the stacking order and the control, and we're just getting started, this is just a basic lesson, are some of the things that are very important about working with layers. But tell you what, let's dig a little bit deeper. If you don't already have it open from the previous lesson, go ahead and open up Mandala.ai. And let's talk about complexity here. Now I'm going to move the layers panel over so we can see it better. Give it a place of prominence. Let me move this over a little bit too, this way, so we can see the big picture. Okay. Now that's a complicated document. We have it in 4 layers, and that's a good thing. When you're working in Adobe Illustrator, I think there are 2 paths that you can go down. One path is the path of logic and order, as well as creativity. But what I mean is you're watching what you're doing. You say, okay, we're getting here. I need another layer. I need one for the flowers, for the leaves, for the pretties, the backdrop. I need to organize this document up front so I don't have a problem later on. And the other way seems to be the path I go down a lot, is I'm so having fun, if you will, with the journey that I'm not watching what I'm doing logically, and I wind up with a document that's very complicated in one single layer. Now, if you're working in Photoshop and you've got one layer with something like this in it, well, you might as well forget it because you're not going anywhere. That's paint on a canvas. Let's do this. Select Backdrop right over here and go up to this button, Options. Now you have a Merge selected. So if we had like 2 or 3 layers, we could just merge those layers. I'm going to come down here and flatten the whole thing, flatten artwork. Now, unlike Photoshop, the items are objects, so they're still separate. But let's say for the sake of argument that we've gotten to this point and basically we put it all together and now we come to the realization that, whoa, this thing's kind of complicated. I'm stepping on my own feet trying to do things, or stepping on my own toes. I need to separate this stuff out. And again, if you were in Photoshop, there's no way you could do that. But these are objects. Now, I did something, let's call it cheating, to help out. Like these flowers are a lot of pieces, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flowers. I grouped them together. I don't need to spend 20 or 30 minutes here selecting petals of a flower to prove I can select something. We're talking about organizing and moving it, okay? So that's what we're here for. We need more layers. So let's do this. Let's go to Backdrop and click the new button down here. There's a new layer. Let's say this one is going to be our flowers. So we'll type in flowers. Now, years ago, not the last version, but about 2 before that, basically when you double-clicked on a layer, you got all the layer options, and that's the only way you could rename it. So it's kind of nice you could do it right here. Now, how do we get the flowers up there? Well, the first thing we have to do is select them. So I have my selection tool here, and I'm going to select this group. I'll hold down the Shift key, obviously, in this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Got them all. Notice there is a small little square right here. Now that square means I have 1 or more things selected. Notice also that the bounding box going around these is green, which corresponds to that color right here. So I'm going to grab that square and I'm going to drag it up to the flowers layer and let go. Now, 2 things happened. It did move them. Number 2, it changed the bounding box around them to that color, the red. That's a nice feature because it lets me know just by looking at something on the screen when I click on it, based on the bounding box, which layer it's in without looking at the layers panel to figure it out. So we've got the flowers where we want them to be. Let me show you another way to do this. Let's create a new layer. Now this is not the best way. I just showed you the best way. Now this would be the pretties. Okay, we go in and they're all grouped together right down here. There they are. All my pretties are all grouped together. And so I've got them selected. And I come over here and I go Edit Cut. Puts it into clipboard memory. I then go to pretties and say Edit, but not Edit Paste. Edit Paste in place. Put them back where they were, but put them in the different layer. Okay, now they're on top of things. I want the flowers on top of everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the flower layer up here to bring it up. So now you can see that flower here. Now the backdrop we can leave alone, but there is one more thing in the backdrop, and that's the leaves. And I want the leaves kind of where they are right now, underneath the flowers. So if I select backdrop and click the new button here for new layer, it'll put that layer above backdrop. I won't have to move it. And if I double click, and we'll call that leaves, because that's what's going in there. And this time we'll do it the efficient way. So we go into leaves right here and select them. And you can see they're all selected. I had them grouped. And we'll just simply grab that little icon again and drag it up. Now, if you hold the Alt key when you do that, you're making a copy. If you just drag it, you're moving. Notice they're moved, which is a good thing. Notice also that the bounding box changed color to match the color over here. So most of the time you kind of pay attention to it. But in Adobe Illustrator, because we're dealing with objects, if you do find yourself in a situation where the complexity of the document is beginning to exceed your ability to work with it efficiently, it's not really that difficult to actually make new layers and then move things into those different layers. When you're working in Adobe Illustrator on an image and you're using the Layers panel, which you do, all layers have options. We can control each layer individually. Let me go into Mandala. Doesn't really matter. You can open up anything you want for this lesson. And I'm going to bring over my Layers panel. Now there are the 4 layers in this particular document. How many layers can you have? It's really infinite. You can have as many layers as you want. Now I do know in Photoshop you can have like 8,000 layers. You could probably have that many or even more in this program. And here's something else to understand about layers in Illustrator that I like. When you add layers in Photoshop, you're adding file size because you're adding more areas to add pixels, and pixels are like bricks and they have weight. When you're adding layers in Adobe Illustrator, the layer itself really does not contain any weight because we're talking about math. So one of the advantages in Illustrator to really breaking up your documents into multiple layers is it's not going to impact complexity or file size. That's kind of cool. Let's do this. If I want to rename one, I can come up here and just click on that and rename it, which is relatively new. Every time you double-clicked on a layer a couple of versions ago, you always got the options. But now, like Photoshop and like InDesign, you can double-click right there and change the layer name. Maybe that's all you want to do. I want to change the options. So choose the layer you want to do that to and double-click over here right there. And there are the layer options. Now the first one's the name, which of course we can now do over here if we want to. And if that's all you want to do, just do it over here. The color, that's the color of the anchors and the paths. Remember, anchors and paths are essentially invisible. They're not really designed to print. We stroke them, we fill them, but that's the color they're going to look like. Every different layer gets, by the computer, a different color. Now, most of the time, I'm more than happy to let the computer do that for me. Why not? The only reason I might change that is because the anchor colors are matching the color of the background that I'm working on. Like, say, this reddish color over here is similar to this over here, and it's going to be hard to see the anchors, and I might come in and say, nah, use this color, because it contrasts better with what I'm doing. But that color has absolutely nothing to do with anything else but the anchor colors for the layer, and it's displayed over here too. Kind of nice. Here is a template option. Now what's that? Well, notice it locks it, and it turns off the print option and gives you the ability to dim the images. What's that do? A template layer doesn't print. It's designed to help guide you. Now I do a lot of web design in Adobe Illustrator. I really do. And there's a lot of different things that I do, but I need templates to help me out. For example, maybe 1024 by 768 area with a couple of areas marked out to help me decide where things are going to go. And so I make it a template so I don't accidentally print it or use it. So you have an option for template. You have a locking button here. And all you have to do is click over here, though. You don't have to go here to get the lock. Same thing with show or hide. That's that same button that's over here. Now here's the print button. Why would you not want to print a layer? Well, there are actually a lot of reasons for that. Say, for example, we know in terms of how people look at things and read that it's more of a strain to read something on a computer monitor if it's against a white background. So I create an Adobe Illustrator document and I put a background behind it of, say, 20% gray. And it kind of mutes that white coming at you when you're reading text. But if you print it, I don't want you to waste a cartridge of ink printing gray on the back of your paper. So I say, let them see it, but don't print it. That would be one reason you might do that. Another reason is sometimes I'll put instructions on how to complete a project inside of a layer that they can look at when they actually view it on the screen, but they don't want to print it with the document when they're done. No printing. Preview, we've done this before. We've gone up to the word view and gone into outline or preview mode, and it does the entire document. But you can outline or preview an individual layer by turning that on and off. You have dim images too if you want to dim your photographs and images down. So those are the different options that you have for a layer, and each layer can have its own individual options. Go ahead and reopen Mandala.ai, and we'll work on that one more time. I'm going to move my layers panel over here again. In the previous lesson, we looked at the individual options for a layer. So every layer can be controlled the way you want that layer to react. Print, not print, template, whatever you want it to do. But the layers panel also has, in a sense, overall options that control the layers in general for the document. Let's look at those. Up here, right there, click that button. Actually, we have flowers layer selected. You want something selected. I'm going to click here, and you get all this stuff. Now, the first one, basically, you don't have to be here to do new layer. If you want a new layer, just click this button right down here, and you will make a new layer. The difference is if you click this one, it will open up the options for you. We talked about the options in the previous lesson. What's a sublayer? Well, let me show you something. If you open up any one of these layers with this triangle right here, you will see or begin to see drilling down into the elements that make up those actual pieces. Now, in the flowers, I did group them. So each one of these is a group, and if I open the group, you're now looking at all the pieces that make up just one of those flowers, from here all the way back up to here. You could potentially have hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces going on inside that layer. Those are sublayers. Now, if I close this out just for a second, collapse it back out, and I select flowers, and I want to create a sub-layer inside there. To be honest with you, I don't do that very often, but if I wanted to, I would select the layer and click here and then say, New Sublayer. Now there it is, right there. There's nothing in it yet, and there's our options automatically open telling us, well, what do you want to do? Now I'm going to cancel out, don't want to do that. And let me go ahead and collapse this back out. That's a sub-layer. Come back over here again. Actually, let me select something first. That would help. Back over here again and go into maybe options for flowers. Now that's the options for the flower that we talked about in the previous lesson. You can get them here too if you want to. We will talk about clipping mask, but not in this chapter, so we're going to skip that one. What's isolation mode? We've already talked about that. I am in the flowers layer. I want to isolate the flowers layer and work on just those flowers. I want to isolate myself. Isolation mode, you click it. It grays out everything, which is cool. That way you can see it, you can use it in terms of maneuvering, changing position, but you're only working, as you can see in the layers panel, on that particular layer. But there is an easier way to do this. Let me come back here and say exit. If you come over here with your selection tool and you want to work on that flower and you want to go into isolation mode, double click on it. Instant isolation mode. You want to get out of it? You can do it right up here. Now this area is only there because we are in isolation mode. And I can back myself back down to here and get all the way out eventually. Or if I'm working on something, I can double click over here and get back out. Now it doesn't mean you can't use that. It's just that I think it's easier to do it this way. Now I had a student one time ask me this question. He said, Andy, I understand isolation mode, but I never use it. And I'm always double clicking on something, accidentally getting into isolation mode. I know I can double click outside of it or actually press the escape key and get out of it. But is there a way to turn that off? We wouldn't be having this conversation if there wasn't a way to do it. Go into your preferences. That's Edit in Windows, and on a Macintosh, go to Illustrator and go into General Preferences. Double click to isolate. If you turn that off, now I use it, so I'm going to leave it on, and the default is on. But if you don't want to use it, you can turn it off. That means the only way you can get to it would be from the pull-down menu. So let's go back up here again. You have what's called Locate Object. Now remember, there are zillions of things going on these subpaths. Let's say we come back out here again and select this guy right here. Actually, we have to do that with the direct selection tool, sorry, because those are in a group. I want to find not the other ones. That's Find Similar. I want to find where that one exists in all those hundreds and millions of paths. So I select it. I come over here and I go down to Locate Object, and it will open it up and show me there it is, way over here. And once I've got it, I can turn it on, off. I can lock it if I want to for some reason. I have control, but there's an easier way to do that. Let me go ahead and collapse it back out of here again. Let's say I do want to find this guy right here. Click this button. That's the Locate Object button, and it will do the same thing. So it's a little bit quicker. A lot of the stuff here can be done somewhere in the actual panel. Let me go ahead and collapse that out and continue our journey of discovery. Let me select flowers. Back up again. If I have leaves and backdrop as layers selected, I can say Merge Selected. It will leave flowers and pretties alone. I can flatten the artwork. We did that earlier. Everything goes into one layer. The name of the layer will be the layer that you had selected when you did it. And we can even collect in a new layer. So we can say, I want this and this and this in a new layer. Click on those, select them, and say Collect in a new layer. Now down here we have Release to Layers in a Sequence or Release to Layers in a Build. So let me show you something. Let's open up flowers again right here. You got all these different groups. If I come over here and say Release to Layers, it takes them out as a sublayer and releases them to that layer. Let me go ahead and undo that. Just gives you more control if you want to work with them that way. The other one is, same idea. Let me select flowers so you can see that. It will release them into a build, and then you can, if you want to, reverse the order. Now you have a button here to turn that layer into a template. You can do that from the options. You've got Hide Others. Now watch what happens when I do that with the flowers layer selected. Well, it hides everything. It turns off all the show buttons right here. Let me go ahead and go back up there again and say Show. There's a much easier way to do that. If you're working on leaves and you want to hide everything but leaves, hold on the Alt key, that's the Option key on a Mac, Alt key in Windows, and click the Show Hide button, and it will hide everything but leaves. Do it again with the same key, and it'll bring everything back for you. Come back up here again. We have Outline Others. I like that one. Now watch again, leaves. It will outline everything but leaves. It gives you a physical or a visual look of exactly what you're doing without the distraction of the colors and information, and you can keep working. Let me go ahead and go back up there again and tell the computer to preview all layers. Now there is a shortcut for that one too. If you want to outline everything but say pretties, come over here, but before you click, that's just going to turn them on and off. Hold down the Alt key and the Control key in Windows or the Option key and the Command key on Mac, and then click. Same thing. Click again, same two keys. It comes right back for you. Let's go ahead and go back to flowers and come back up here again. You have an option to lock everything but the layer you have selected. Okay, let me unlock those. But again, there's a shortcut for that. If you want to lock everything but the layer you're working on, hold the Alt key when you click here. That's the Option key on a Mac, Alt key in Windows, and it does the same thing. Do it again, unlocks everything. Just an easier way to get to it. Then, if you come down one more time, we have Paste Remembers Layers. Pasting remembers layers. Let's do this. Let's come over here and create a new document. I'm going to draw an object, and I'm going to choose a star, whatever. And let's give it a color. And let's give that the name star. Okay, so I have a document that has a layer or layers in it, and I want to move that document with that layer into another document that I have. So I select the actual star and go up to Word Edit and say Copy. Okay, so phase one. Now we go back to this one. Watch what happens if I just do an Edit Paste. It will paste the star into whatever layer is selected when you do the paste. You might want to do that. It's no big deal. Let me undo that. Now, come back over here and say Paste Remembers Layers. You can see there's a little check mark next to it now. Now do a paste. Watch what happens. It remembers it was in a layer in another document. It gives you the layer. It keeps its name. Paste Remembers Layers. Let me get rid of that one. And let me go ahead and turn that off. Now there is one more thing. If we come back out and go into Panel Options, In panel options, you can control things like the size of the rows. Okay, make those bigger, if you want to. You can go into your thumbnails for layers and say top level only. You can say thumbnails for your groups and objects, turn those on and off. This one right here, though, show layers only. Turn that on and then watch what goes on over here. Okay, you are in a sense back in legacy Illustrator. Back years ago when we only had the layer itself and we didn't have control of the sub layers. Now you can still get to stuff. We can still do things. But we don't have that control if we want it by expanding the layer out. Let's go ahead and go back there, go into panel options and turn that one, for me anyway, off. Go ahead and click OK. Well, that's about it. Those are the options for the layers panel that control the document itself, and the individual layers can be controlled also. Control is an important thing in a program as complicated as Adobe Illustrator. Raise your hand out there if you think the layers panel is important. Now, I would think after going through this chapter, we'd all agree with that. It allows us to do so much stuff. I mean, we can show hide. We can lock things down. We can select an entire layer and all the objects within it just with a click. All kinds of things. The layers panel is an organizational tool. Now, there are some enhancements to it. Small things to be sure, but small things add up, don't they? For example, if we go into the layers panel and we touch the target button right here, you see a hand appear with the index finger pointing up. You didn't see that before. You just saw an arrow. So you had to assume you were in the right place before you clicked. That's nice. Let me come out here and deselect that for a second. If I want to basically make a copy of a layer, and I do that a lot, so I start dragging it down, and then I hold down the Alt key. Now, it's the Option key in a Mac, Alt in Windows, and now you see a plus sign. You didn't see that before. Small thing, but it helps. Let me go ahead and undo that. The one I like the best is preserving the layer's state. Now, if I come into circles or into triangles or whatever, and I'm having difficulty maybe selecting something, or I want to move it, or I want to lock it, but it's just one element within the layer, I can expand it, can't I? Now, inside of here, we have all the paths for that layer. There's all the triangles. So I can show hide just one. I can lock just one. I can move it. I can select it. Lots of different things we can do. So I've expanded it out. Now, previous to this version of Illustrator Creative Cloud, if I close this file down and reopened it, all of these would be reset. Again, that's not a big deal, but to me it is. If I expand a layer, there's a reason why I did that. And I want it to stay expanded until I decide I don't want it expanded anymore. Now, if we come up here and say File Save, let's go ahead and close it. Go right back up to File, Open Recent. I do like that option. And say Reopen that file. There it is. So the feature of preserving the layer state to me is the most important one. And they've added a few other things too, just to make our lives that much easier. Go into your working folder and open up opacityblendingmodes.ai. We're going to talk about something that's technically not a part of the layers panel, so you can kind of get me on this one because this chapter is about layers. But let's go into layers and bring it out here. I want to talk about opacity and blending modes. And the reason I'm bringing it up now, because we are going to use them more in the following chapters, is because if you use a program like Photoshop, and I'm only making an assumption here, if you use a program like Photoshop, you're used to seeing opacity and blending modes as part of the layers panel. It's right up here, right up at the top. Where are they in Illustrator? They have their own panel. It's right over here, transparency. So let's bring that one out. Have a fun old time here and bring out all these panels. One of the questions that's asked is why? I mean, Photoshop has it as part of the layers panel. It makes sense. I've been using it that way for 20 years. So why are they separate? Well, think of the difference between Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Photoshop is raster-based. It's paint on a canvas. Everything in that layer is controlled by, it's one big piece. In Illustrator, we deal with objects. It's not about the layer. The layer is there for control, but not to separate things necessarily. So in order for me to do something to something, I have to select it. You don't do that in Photoshop. So it wouldn't make sense to have blending modes and opacity as part of the layers panel, since we're not really technically controlling a layer, we're controlling an object. And once you get over that part, it's no big deal because they function about the same way. For example, I have this green circle selected. Let me shift-click on the red and shift-click on the blue. And let's go into a wonderful area. I love blending mode. I really do. They're so much fun to work with, and they are very creative. You blend elements together, objects in this case, based on those options. So let's say we go to screen right here. Now notice how it blends where they interact. Between the red and the green and the blue and the blue and the red, you get a blending, a screening of the colors. And what you're actually looking at here are the additive and subtractive color sets. Red, green, and blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow, where they interact. If we select them again, and maybe try luminosity. You're looking at the luminosity values now and not the colors, so we get shades of gray if you want to do something like that. You could spend all day long on these things. I've taught entire classes on nothing but blending modes in Photoshop. They're amazing and they are very creative. Now down here, just to again give you a hint at what these things do, because we will talk more about them, is you do have the ability in a vector program to control the opacity of the item. If we come over to our eagle right here, and we could do a blending mode on him too, like maybe overlay. Doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter the object. Two objects can be blended together, two or more. Let's take him to normal. I want him to kind of blend a little bit into that background by changing his opacity. So if we click here, notice you got a 0 up here. Ever wonder why you want a 0 opacity? We'll talk more about that later, but it has to do with masks. We're not going to do masks yet. We're just talking about these two. Well, let's make him about 60. Basically, what you're doing is you are slowly making him go semi-transparent, and if there's something behind him, it will begin to show. Blending modes and opacity in Adobe Illustrator. They weren't always there, but they function basically the same way on vector objects as blending modes and opacity function on raster objects in Adobe Photoshop.